Hey everybody, did you know that it's said that up to 80% of the US is either insulin resistant or pre-diabetic? And even worse, the majority of that percentage has no idea of their situation and have no idea that sometimes don't even know what insulin resistance is. Hey, welcome back to another video today. Today we're going to talk about the 7 signs of insulin resistance and diabetes and what you can start to do about them. But before I get into those 7 signs, most people think about food and everything that they have to give up when they hear about diabetes or insulin resistance. And, really, they have to give up everything that they love. And that's just simply not true. One of the things that I've done for you today before I get into the tips is I put a bunch of recipes down below, in the description that you can download today, and then you can start trying. And if you're watching this at the time it comes out, the holidays are just around the corner, and those recipes are designed to be used during the holidays so that you can still eat the right foods, you can still enjoy them, and you don't have to worry about the health sacrifices that you might be making while enjoying them. So go below, definitely make sure you download those today and start giving it a try so you don't have to give up everything that you love. Okay, and so one other thing, of course, make sure you subscribe, hit the subscribe button below, hit that bell. I'm going to be sharing a lot of tips of what you can do about all these insulin resistance, diabetes, and things to just be healthier in life. So make sure you do that for me so I can share that information directly to you. So let's dive in. Okay, so over the past decade, I've dealt with hundreds of diabetics a year, severe cases of diabetes, and with some of the tips that we're going to be going over, you have helped them reverse and certainly improve that disease. Okay, but one of the biggest things that I'm always surprised by is even with those severe cases, most people really don't know what the signs of diabetes are, what the signs of insulin resistance is. So really what these videos are for and what the new stuff that I'm creating is to basically help you or anyone avoid being that severe case that shows up in our office. All right. I want to avoid that step of before that diabetes diagnosis, before the decades of damage that's done from that disease. So what I'm going to go over are the 7 signs of diabetes or insulin resistance that you can look for. And if you're experiencing some of these, at the very end, I'm actually going to tell you some labs that you can ask your doctor to run so that you can actually check in and see how you're doing. Okay. But yes, unfortunately, like I opened up this video with, unfortunately, up to 80% of the US is expected to be insulin resistant or pre-diabetic. That's just mind-blowing you when you really think about it, because that diagnosis of diabetes is kind of like a death sentence. It doesn't come with anything good, right? In most of the mainstream medical system, they're talking about, how you only can manage it. And I'm not a medical doctor. I can't tell you to do with those medications. But if you're seeing some of these signs and you run some of those tests, I'll be able to tell you some of the things you can do to hopefully not get to that point. Okay. So make sure you listen all the way through so you can confirm those suspicions and whether you or someone else might be dealing with diabetes. So number 1, okay, this one most people that tend to know about, but that's frequent urination. Now, there's a couple reasons for why we get this frequent urination, but ultimately when blood sugar goes up, okay, that's creating more inflammation in the body. And then at the same time, when that blood sugar is going up, okay, when it gets to a certain point, your body now is trying to get rid of all the extra sugar. So what's going to happen is it's going to flush that out through the kidneys, through your urine, making you pee a lot more often. Okay, number 2 kind of again goes with number 1, is that you're always thirsty. There are certain things that happen with these different hormones, insulin, those types of things. But when you're constantly voiding that urine out and voiding that blood sugar out, you're just going to have to drink and drink and drink. You never feel satisfied. So if you notice, if you're drinking a ton of water, and you're always thirsty, you never seem satisfied, definitely start paying attention to that a little bit more. Number 3 is another one where tingling and numbness in the hands or feet. I kind of refer this to as like if you constantly notice that your hands or feet are falling feel like they're falling asleep, and it does show up differently for everyone. Sometimes it's a little tingle, sometimes it's a little burn, sometimes it's kind of like little needle pricks. It does show up for everyone a little bit differently. But ultimately, what's happening there is, so when blood sugars are high, okay, you're producing a lot more insulin. That's causing a lot more inflammation. And there's these little nerve endings and there's these little arteries and things that go into these areas. And they tend to be the first ones that get destroyed by that inflammation. And so that signal goes away between your brain and your body, and it replaces it with a sensation, typically showing up as that tingling, that numbness, that burning. Okay, so if you're noticing that, start paying attention a little bit more. And this one I'm going to call number 4, but it is kind of piggybacking off of that tingling and numbness. The tingling and numbness comes from the nerves, but this number 4 is more of like if your wounds are healing slowly. Like if you get a little nick or if you kind of scratch yourself, and normally that usually would heal up in a day or two or start to kind of disappear pretty quickly. If that starts to really drag on and takes a while to ultimately heal up, what that means is you're just not getting that healing ability. Those arteries, those nerves are starting to break down. You can't heal as quickly. So that's another sign of that insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, right? Number 5, okay, constant hunger or cravings. And this is an interesting thing that a lot of people are surprised by because, if I have high blood sugars, if I have diabetes, if I have insulin resistance, why would I always be hungry? Doesn't my body feed on sugar? Shouldn't I be okay if it's high? But the problem is, the answer is no. Right. And this will tie into one of the other ones I'm going to talk about too. But your body basically is getting all these peaks and valleys, and it doesn't have the ability to use the sugars and use the fuels that it has. So you're constantly eating, but you're not actually using that nutrition source. And so you're constantly feeling hungry. We can get into a whole different conversation on hormones and the brain and all that sort of stuff, but ultimately know that signal again is being disrupted and your body doesn't understand that it has that fuel. It can't use it properly. Okay. Another one is blurry eyesight. The eyes are a very delicate thing. And just like the tingling and numbness in the hands, the eyes are heavily affected by those high sugars, by that high inflammation. And so this is not like, I'm getting older or anything like that. This is something where if you notice that progression and that breakdown happening a lot faster, this is definitely something you want to look into, see what your insulin resistance is like, what your blood sugars are like. If you're seeing that blurriness come in at a pretty high aggressive rate. Okay. Number 7 is low energy and fatigue. Do you ever wake up and you just feel like, man, I did not get enough sleep? Or you go upstairs and you're just like, holy crap, I just did an hour workout. This goes along with that same thing about the cravings. Your cells need to be able to get that sugar into the cell in order to create what's called ATP. Okay, that is the energy source of our bodies. And when you're insulin resistant, the reason your blood sugars are so high in your body is because those cells are not allowing that sugar to get in. The receptors and the resistance is not allowing that to get in. Therefore, it cannot produce the energy out for you to feel better. Okay, so low energy or fatigue or like easily being wiped out is another sign of that insulin resistance. And the one that I'll say, like, we'll call this number 8. I'll kind of call it a bonus one, especially because I put that the tingling and numbness and the wound healing together. We'll call this number 8, but it may be 7.1 is weight gain. And now weight gain can come from a lot of different things, but it's more of that like weight loss resistance. When you're trying to do everything you can and just weight is not going anywhere, it could be because of this insulin resistance and prediabetes. Because when you're having high blood sugars, you're going to have a lot more insulin in your body, and insulin is a fat storing hormone. If you're constantly pumping out insulin, right, your body's not going to say, hey, I'm going to burn fat, because it's getting this signal to constantly store fat. And so to kind of go over those again in a row, so the 7 things to look out for. And if you're dealing with some of these, I'm going to give you the tests here in a minute of how to confirm that, what to ask your doctor for. But if you have any of these, start to really look at, okay, maybe I should look into my blood sugars a little bit more. Okay, look in that insulin resistance before it turns into something much worse. So number 1, frequent urination. Number 2, always being thirsty. Number 3 is that tingling or numbness in the hands or in the feet. Okay. Number 4, slow wound healing. Number 5, constant hunger or constant cravings, never feeling satisfied. That's a big one. Number 6 is blurry eyesight. You know, that more than rapid, more than aging, but more of a rapid sort of decrease of that eyesight. Number 7 is that low energy or fatigue easily. Okay. And then the bonus one that I kind of threw in, that weight loss resistance, specifically around like the belly and those types of things. All right. So those are the big ones, you know, and if that sounds like you, if you're ticking off a lot of those marks, right, it might be time to look into doing something about it. And there are a couple things that you can do. Number 1, I already mentioned it right away. Make sure to download the recipes that I put down below. Start trying some of those out, especially into the holiday season. You know, this is the big area of temptation. Try some of those recipes and see if you can do a little bit better through the holidays. Number 2, subscribe to this page. We've dealt with some of the hardest diabetic cases out there. We've dealt with so many health conditions. I do not want you to be one of them. I'm going to be giving away all my nuggets here, and hopefully you can walk away with some of those, start reversing your condition, start seeing that improve. You know, lose weight without exercise, better energy, sleeping better at night, you know, balancing of the hormones, those types of things. And then number 3, something that you can do here is basically ask your doctors for these 3 labs. Now, of course, there are many more that we can do, but these are definitely something that you can ask for that, depending on how they show up, will either confirm or deny whether or not you are one of that 80% in the insulin resistant factor or pre-diabetic. Number 1 is what's called a hemoglobin A1C, okay, known as A1C. Basically what this does is it looks at the last 3 months average of what your blood sugars were. And based on that number, it can tell you, are you in the normal range? Are you in the pre-diabetic range? Or are you in the diabetic or even out of control diabetic range? Just so you know, different markers are different acceptable ranges, I should say, are different per state, per country, those types of things. If you're here in the US, basically you want that to be below 5.5 to be normal. Okay. Once it starts going above that, you start getting in those diabetic ranges. I will say that I tend to like to hold people to a little bit of a lower number than that, just to make sure you're not dealing with some of that insulin resistance. But an A1C is a good thing to ask for, and a pretty common test that doctors are used to running, so they shouldn't fight back too much on you. Another one, this one's a little bit more harder to ask for. Doctors aren't always willing to do it, but it's called C-peptide. So like the letter cat, or letter C for cat, C-peptide basically will tell us how hard is your pancreas working. It's a stable marker that we can say, is your body producing enough insulin, or is it producing too much? Is it working too hard? Right? This will give us some understanding of what to expect in the future and how difficult it might be to create some change. And then the other one too, just mentioned it, is a part of it is insulin. More importantly, a fasting insulin, right? Because most diabetics think that their blood sugar is high because they do not produce insulin, where actually it's a disease of too much insulin. So if you do that fasting insulin and it's too high, okay, that is a sign of early insulin resistance. Even if your A1C is okay, if you're producing a lot of insulin, that's one of the first signs that says that you are insulin resistant and you are on the route to a diabetic diagnosis. Okay, so take a look at this, subscribe on below, get those recipes. You know, I'm going to be sharing more information on what you can do with this if this sounds like you. So make sure you subscribe, share these out with anyone you think it might benefit. And I look forward to seeing you on another one where I plan to talk about more tips and tricks that you can do. Also, if you haven't already, check out that everything in moderation video that I did to make sure you're not doing some of those things, and some tips that you can do to start breaking the mold. All right, guys, be happy, be healthy.